Hello, this is Brian Rowe with my first EDH deck tech for a deck I call Reign of Dragons. Sorry if I'm going to be speaking a little quick here. This is my fifth attempt at recording this video, and doing a deck tech in EDH is difficult given the number of cards you want to cover. So this deck is my third EDH deck that I've built, and by far one of my favorites to play in kind of a casual multiplayer format. The general is Scion of the Ur Dragon. He's flying. For 2 mana, you can search your library for a dragon card and put it into your graveyard. If you do, Scion of the Ur Dragon becomes a copy of that card until end of turn, and then you shuffle your library. So this is a super heavy dragon deck. It has a lot of utility that comes from searching for those dragons, and it also has a secondary reanimator theme to it, because you're going to be dropping your graveyard full of dragons very quickly. Now, let's run through first some of the support cards that we're looking at. I kind of chose what my favorites or best were in each color. For green, there's a lot of mana ramp here. It's important you get out to your commander as soon as possible. Commando's Reach is beautiful here. Explosive Vegetation allows you to take 2 basic land and put it into play. There's also Rampant Growth in here at the 2 spot, and Cultivate in here. So there's a large amount of ramp. There's also some color fixing in here with things like land tax that lets you go through and grab any basic land, up to 3 basic land as long as you have less land than your opponents, which works really well. I'm running 2 of each basic land in this deck. Some of the other things that are in here on the utility side is I've got a board wipe that also hits artifacts because I'm using very few artifacts. I decided to put no swords in here because I think that dragons look really silly holding swords, even though there's a combo or 2 out there that you can use with swords. This is more on the fun side. And then we've got a nice package of reanimator cards. We've got Dread Returns here, Patriarch's Bidding, which is just beautiful because you choose a single creature type and each other player chooses a creature type and then returns all creatures of that type. This is often much better than Living Death, which is also inside the deck, but because it only hits dragons, this is by far my preferred reanimation spell in this deck. We've got a few cards here to fill the graveyard. Buried Alive and Careful Study. The draw 2, discard 2 is beautiful, especially if you get an opening hand with several dragons in it. Exhume is also really nice, as you can often have dragons already in your graveyard while your opponents have none. Windfall is also another really good one, along with Wheel of Fortune, for refilling your hand while filling your graveyard at the same time. Torment of Souls is another nice reanimator. It's red or black. If you spend red, they gain +2, you get +2/+0, and haste if you spend both red and black on it. One of my favorite utility spells in here is actually one that another member of Tapped Out pointed out, which is Conflux. It's 5 mana, 1 of each color, plus 3 colorless mana in order to cast it. It lets you search through your library for a card of each different color type and put them into your hand. I originally didn't have this in the deck because I didn't realize it was a dragon card until it was pointed out to me later that the hand there is actually the hand of one of the other dragons that's inside the deck. It's Nicol Bolas, who's both in here as a planeswalker and as a Classic Legends dragon. Fits the theme extremely well. On the instant side, we've got a little more card draw and a little more of the reanimator items in here. Fact or Fiction has to be one of my absolute favorite card draws because it gives your opponent a very difficult choice. If you've got enough mana, you can often fill your graveyard with dragons or put them directly in play, depending on what you choose. Intuition is also wonderful at instant speed to do the same thing, choosing 3 cards, often a dragon that you want, plus 2 reanimator spells, guaranteeing that you'll get that out. Forbidden Alchemy is also really nice as an Innistrad common in here, because the mana ramp allows you to cast it twice pretty quickly, and it fills your graveyard while getting you exactly what you need. On the enchantment side, one of the few that I've got in here that I don't see anybody else playing is Steely Resolve. As Steely Resolve comes into play, you choose a creature type. creatures of the chosen type cannot be targeted with spells or abilities. It's just wonderful with dragons. It works better than several higher casting cost items in protecting all of your dragons. Defense of the Heart is also in here. Works especially well versus token decks, but anybody who throws out several creatures is going to have to meet 2 of your largest creatures. Response. Sneak Attack is also in here, both because it's got the wonderful picture of a dragon on it, but it works really well with the Reanimator theme because you get to choose a creature in your hand, put it into play, it has haste till end of turn, and at the end of turn you sack it. And it ends up in your graveyard. Let's cruise here to the artifacts quickly. We've got kind of your EDH standard utility suite with Sensei's Divining Top, which works really well with land tax and scroll rock, so you've got some extra cards coming, and it helps you fix any mana issues that are there. I've got a Phyrexian Furnace, which is one of the few cards in here that I'm not super happy with. Playing Reanimator, I want to kill other people's graveyards, but I just don't think this does it fast enough, although it's got a cantrip ability. When you sacrifice it, you remove target card from someone's graveyard, and you draw a card. Mox Diamond's in here for the mana fixing, and Quicksilver Amulet is one of my absolute favorites. It's probably even better than the Sneak Attack, as it brings the creature out onto the battlefield, albeit without haste, but it stays there permanently. And at instant speed, it's wonderful for blocking. I wish that it had a nice picture of a dragon on here, although it looks like the artwork in the ring actually has a dragon. That makes me much happier with this card now that I look at it really closely. I'm going to have to check to see which artwork I have. I think I actually have the other artwork in my deck. I'll be updating it to this artwork since it's got a dragon in it. Now, let's look at some of the dragons here. We've got several dragons that do damage to other creatures. I have a little trouble with token decks or kind of horde decks, and these dragons fix that problem. We've got a Reanimator dragon, which hits the Reanimator theme. We have more dragons that do damage. Scion as our commander is beautiful. Nicol Bolas is just a call out to one of the best Legends dragons printed, and the ability to wipe an opponent's hand is just wonderful. It's also, if you decide to play in the more competitive kind of dueling environment, this can just win you a game right away, as you can often get your commander out on turn 3 or 4 and then attack with him the next turn, killing your opponents. Coiling Oracle, although not a dragon, is at least reptile-like and more mana acceleration. Niv works really well with Windfall and Wheel of Fortune, as it can do a lot of damage, 1 damage each time a card is drawn. Birds of Paradise is in there for mana fixing. Kiga is actually one of my favorites, because anytime somebody goes to kill Scion, I'm happy to put Scion into the graveyard, but I turn him into Kiga, and then I go get whatever their best creature is. Yoshi, if they don't have any creatures out, will work the same way in tapping them down for the next turn, because it taps 5 permanents and they don't untap during the next untap phase. I've got Eternal Witness in here as a little more utility, and Solemn Simulacrum is an EDH standard that just speeds you up. Bladewing of the Risen is often one of those cards that I will go tutor for, and I'm happy to have him in the graveyard because he also brings back another dragon when I reanimate him. Dragon Tyrant is one of the few kind of scarier cards in here, as the fire-breathing and double strike, when combined with Scion, can be enough commander damage to commander somebody out in a single turn. I usually don't use him that way, but if as a last resort I will. Eternal Dragon is beautiful in this deck, especially with the dual lands, because it allows you to search for any planes with the plane cycling for 2, and to bring it back for 5 to your hand during upkeep and do it again. But since your dual lands also count as planes, it allows you to get any color mana. It's great mana fixing. Quicksilver Dragon is another one that also people don't usually expect, because it allows you to re-target spells. So somebody tries to Swords to Plowshare your Scion, you turn it into Quicksilver Dragon for 2, and then for 1 you re-target that at whatever item you want. Anger's in here. He's nice with the Reanimator theme and can get your dragon swinging pretty quickly, although I wish he was a dragon so that I could drop him in the graveyard faster. I have some trouble killing him from time to time. We've got Vampiric Dragon in here, which is another form of removal and being able to do direct damage. Terev is in here just for life gain. The life gain is pretty slow on it, and this is one of the dragons I may actually end up pulling. because she has to get through to get the life gain. Not that useful of a dragon overall. Thunder Dragon is more damage to non-flying creatures. Hellkite Overlord is often the dragon that I turn Scion into on the first turn he comes out, because he has haste and trample at that point and hits your opponent for 8 commander damage right away. Broodmother is great in big multiplayer games because it puts out little tokens that are 1/1 flyers with Devour 2, and Devour allows you to eat other dragons and then have a giant dragon because it gets +2/+2 at that point for each other one that you create. Karthus is in here, and back there. Karthus is in here specifically for people who steal your dragons. Somebody briberies, goes through, grabs one of your cool dragons. Hopefully they don't grab Karthus, and then you're able to grab Karthus and untap all your dragons, gain control of all dragons on the board, including other people's, and then attack with them right away, because dragons will then have haste. Charger in here gives you double attack phases, or sometimes even triple, depending on how much mana you have out. There are some combos that I've seen with other decks with swords or umbras, so you can untap your mana after you hit an opponent. This really isn't a combo deck, but it's good to be aware of that being in there in some other decks when you see this type of stuff played. Steel Hellkite's really my utility removal. If he gets through, pay X and destroy permanents with converted casting cost of X that controller controls. Sithrix is in here as an alternative win condition. If people bring up huge amounts of life, you can often just bring Sithrix out and poison them if you can't bring them down, although with a horde of dragons like this, you can even chip away at 200 life pretty quickly in 2 to 3 turns. Horde Smelter is wonderful because it doesn't have to attack to get its ability through, and it can just eat other artifacts. This deck is very light on artifacts, and it works really well to eat your opponent's artifacts. Balefire Dragon is actually one of my favorite dragons in here as a new one from Innistrad. If Scion gets through on blocked, I'll often turn him into a Balefire Dragon and then hit all of their creatures for 6 damage. Last thing that I want to point out is the land suite. I'm running all of the basic lands in here, Gemstone Mine and City of Brass for kind of your utility, any color. Then I'm running the search lands in here, one of each of the search lands and one of each of the dual lands outside of Savannah, because I don't have an extra Savannah sitting around. And then some utility lands in Bojuka Bog and Kessig Wolf Run, although Command Tower is also in here, and it's actually probably the most useful land and one of the least expensive. The deck may look really expensive if you check out the profile on Tapped Out, but I want to point out that I also put up a budget profile that is linked that basically replaces all the lands and brings the deck cost down to about $200 instead of $1,500. And at that point, you can also usually trade for these big creatures at a pretty inexpensive amount if you trade for people who are on the more competitive side, because they're willing to give up these cards at well below market if they get tournament playable cards out of it. So the deck looks a lot more expensive than it really needs to be. I highly recommend this deck. It's a lot of fun, and it's surprising how many people really like to lose to giant dragons. I can't tell you the number of times that I've gotten several dragons out late game and had somebody actually be happy about losing a game because I was beating them down with dragons. I hope you get a chance to play the deck. I'd love to hear any feedback or areas of improvement, especially if they kind of replace some of the cards that I have in here with cards that are a little more on the dragon theme while still having wonderful utility, or cards that have dragon artwork in them. Thank you. I look forward to hearing feedback and ideas.